Presented by ChargebackGurus.com.
Dealing with cashback chargebacks. It's a little bit ironic that while cash-based transactions keep becoming increasingly less frequent, it's never been easier to get cash. What once required an in-person transaction with a human bank teller became a self-service process at automated teller machines. And nowadays, who wants to bother hunting down an ATM that won't charge fees when you could just get free cash back with any purchase at your local corner store? Once the exclusive domain of grocery stores, many merchants now offer cash back with a debit transaction as a convenience for their customers. But what happens when a customer asks their bank for a chargeback on a cashback purchase? Merchants who operate brick-and-mortar stores and process card-present transactions are faced with the choice of whether to allow their customers to receive cash back on purchases made with their debit card. The main reason to do this is because customers like it. It's easy and convenient. It costs them nothing. And if your store sells inexpensive sundries, they may come in and buy something quickly just because they need to get some quick cash. It can also be more convenient for merchants to reduce the amount of cash they have to deposit by converting it into card sales that will be settled electronically. However, there are costs associated with providing cashback transactions, and merchants must always be aware of the dispute and chargeback implications for any expanded payment-related services they're thinking about offering. As customers, we tend to take the cashback option at point-of-sale terminals for granted. But it wasn't always the case that you could do simple account withdrawals at the same place where you buy your eggs and milk. How exactly does this process work? And how did it get started in the first place? What is the history of debit card cashback? The first merchant to offer debit card cashback was the British retail chain Tesco. They conceived the idea in the 1980s as a way to reduce the amount of cash their store would have on hand. But the idea was a big hit with consumers and soon spread far and wide. When a customer makes a cashback purchase, usually by entering or selecting a preset amount into the point-of-sale terminal, they are charged the price and tax for the goods they are purchasing, plus the cashback amount. The cashback amount is given to the customer from the cash register, and the merchant gets the money back when the card transaction is settled. There are certain restrictions that banks and card networks place on cashback transactions. Cashback can only be given on debit card purchases, not credit cards. The cashback amount cannot equal the total transaction amount. In other words, merchants can't provide cashback-only transactions. A valid purchase must be included. Cashback can only be given when requested through an electronic payment terminal that meets certain requirements. For example, the terminal must be able to process the cashback amount separate from the purchase amount, and must be able to receive and interpret messages from the issuer in case there are restrictions on the cardholder's account. Banks and card networks also impose limits on how much cashback the cardholder can receive within a given time frame. Merchants generally aren't charged additional fees for providing cash back. Since cashback is only offered on debit card transactions, merchants aren't liable for the same percentages they are with credit card transactions and don't have any additional costs to pass on to the consumer. However, since all debit card transactions are subject to interchange fees, some merchants impose minimum purchase limits, or a nominal fee, so that they don't lose money on low-value debit card transactions made for the sole purpose of requesting cash back. How does cashback affect chargebacks? In the early days of debit card cashback, there were rumors that it could be exploited to steal cardholders' money without their knowledge. These rumors have persisted and occasionally pop up in chain letter email warnings and the like. The premise is that unscrupulous cashiers could add a cashback amount to a customer's transaction and pocket the cash for themselves, although it would be easy enough to see the cashback amount on the transaction receipt. Most cashiering systems, however, are not configured in a way that would allow this to happen, such that cashback can only be requested from the customer's terminal. On the flip side of this, a concern shared by some merchants is that the customers could request cash back and then return to the store and claim that the cashier didn't give them the correct amount. In some places, customers are required to initial their receipts to indicate they received the specified cashback amount. These schemes are relatively infrequent because terminal logs and security cameras make them easy to uncover. Fraud is much more common when the fraudster can remain anonymous or otherwise protected from the consequences of their actions. Chargebacks specifically related to debit card cashback transactions are therefore uncommon. What about chargebacks on purchases that incidentally include a cashback amount, however? Fortunately, merchants have specific protections in these cases. Card networks like Visa require that cashback amounts be assigned unique identifiers in the authorization and clearing messages that keep them separate from the purchase amount. This allows merchants to reconcile their cash drawers when they receive their card payment batches at the end of the day, and allows banks to process chargebacks for purchase amounts without inadvertently including cashback amounts along with them. Conclusion: for merchants worried that offering debit card cashback will open up new vulnerabilities to chargebacks, the news is good. It's hard to put forward a valid chargeback against a cashback transaction. The cashback amount should always be excluded from the chargeback amount, leaving the merchant dealing with a situation no different than any other purchase-related chargeback. In the card-present environment, the rules and required technological security measures go a long way toward screening out invalid chargebacks, especially when compared to the card-not-present world of e-commerce. Card-present merchants who find themselves dealing with a high rate of contestable chargebacks should immediately get busy figuring out why they have a chargeback problem and what steps they need to take to mitigate it.
To learn more, visit chargebackgurus.com.